And we're back. Today's project is to seal the bottoms of both panels with the West System 105 epoxy resin, which is a two-part epoxy. You use about a 5-to-1 ratio of part 1 and part 2, and then you just smear it on all over the backside of the wood. That'll help prevent it from rotting out from the bottom, and hopefully it will improve the lifetime of these panels. So theoretically, this should take about 15 hours to dry, which means that I get to leave it out here all night. And once it is fully cured, I will come back and finish her up. So I've got the epoxy applied to all of the back sides of these pieces here. So I know that they're not going to rot out from the bottom like the last time. Next, I'm going to go on the top with the Varathane Ultimate Spar Urethane Oil-Based Varnish. This stuff is supposed to seal out water. It is superior UV protection and mold and mildew resistant. I will be cutting it with a small amount of mineral spirits. I've seen other people do this, and it helps kind of even out the layers. So I want to give that a shot on this because it's not really a critical exterior wood piece. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. So, with the first layer of varnish on, I thought I would have a better idea of how the color is going to end up in the final one. I don't really like it. I don't like it at all. I brought out the sample piece from the aft cabin section, and yeah, I don't think I did it right. One thing I guess I could try to do is play with coloring in the varnish on the next few layers and see if I can get it to turn a more reddish color. But there's no guarantee that'll work either. At the end of the day, this is a purely cosmetic project, so I'm not too super worried about it. If it looks bad at the end, I might just scrap it and go back to the commercial stuff and figure something else out. But yeah, this has been a fun project to keep me busy during the lockdown, so I'm not going to give up just yet. But overall, I've learned a lot. I'm not upset about this project kind of failing, but anyway, I'll come back to this once the first layer of varnish is cured so that we can attempt to salvage the 3 pieces I've already started. Well, after many months of not touching this project at all, I'm finally back. I was waiting for the weather to cool off a bit so that I can work outside for several hours without dying, as you do in Texas. So, the goal with the project at this point is to get the color matching this color more so. In order for me to do that effectively, I'm going to have to strip off the varnish using heat and some physical persuasion, and then we'll play around with the stain for a bit and try to get as close to this nice amber color as possible. And then once we're done, instead of going back on with varnish, I've actually decided I want to go back on with epoxy. That is after watching multiple other YouTube channels that specialize in woodworking. I think that going back on with epoxy instead of varnish will actually give us a better result. So, let's get into it. So we've got it stripped and sanded and ready for another attempt at the stain. I'm going to be starting with the gun stock at first, and then if I need to apply another color to get the final amber color that we're looking for, I'll have to come back tomorrow after it's dried to do that. So now we're actually in the ballpark of the color that I want. I have to let it dry, and then we'll do a very, very light sanding, and then try applying some epoxy. Well, that's where we are with the color. Next, before I actually finish sealing this off and all that, I've decided that I want to give everything kind of a half-inch margin. And what I'll do is take a chunk of teak that I have and create like half-inch wide strips that border the whole piece. And I'm hoping that will allow for a more consistent transition from the original stuff to the new stuff. So once the edges are trimmed, I'll go ahead and seal it, and we'll finish installing it later on. So I've trimmed back all the edges to create that edge margin that I wanted. I'm going to have to seal it next. I'll use the epoxy that I have on board to seal the top, and then if I need to come back and make it smooth, I'll come back with the varnish and do like a varnish top coat to get a nice smooth finish like I have on the other flooring. Right now it's actually feeling incredibly smooth due to all of the sanding that I did. I'm very happy with how the colors actually turned out on this. So hopefully when I have the epoxy done tonight, we'll be able to finish the project tomorrow. So there is epoxy on this board now. It probably, well, no, I'm looking at the camera now. If you can see on the camera, came out with a bit of a rough texture to it. It's smooth, but I can still feel kind of the imperfections and stuff. So what I'm going to do tomorrow after it has had a chance to cure is I'll give it a rough sanding and then put a couple of thin layers of varnish on it, and I hope that'll give it the nice glossy finish that we have on the original wood. So yeah, we won't finish tomorrow, but I still have to do the triangular bits, and then I think in the next few days at least we'll be installing this into the boat. Well, I've got the pieces here varnished and smooth enough at least for my taste. One thing I noticed on the big piece is that some of the spots got a little bit discolored after I gave it a light sanding. Not really sure what that's about, but honestly, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Literally or figuratively, these are going into my bedroom in a place where I cannot see them from my bed. So it really doesn't matter that much to me. And if you guys are happy with it, I'm happy with it. So tomorrow what I'll do is I'll actually go ahead and epoxy them into the subflooring on the floor of my boat, and we'll leave them there to set, and then I'll work on trimming the big piece out to make it flush with the rest of the floor. But 1 year later, we're almost done with the project, finally. It's been a doozy. So we've got Hurricane Delta out there raging. You can probably see we're getting a little bit rocky and rolly, but it's not too bad. I don't think it'll get much worse than this today, and the storm will be gone by tomorrow. So the plan today is to mix up a cup of epoxy and then install the flooring into the aft cabin. These triangular bits, they're still a little bit sticky, and I don't know why. I probably did a bad job applying the epoxy and varnish, so I'm going to have to wait until it is not hurricaning out. I'm going to restrip them with the aggressive persuasion and a heat gun, and then we'll install them later. Right now I just want to focus on the main part of the flooring. So while it's curing, I've got basically the heaviest stuff I own stacked on top of it to help keep it flat and flush. And I'll come back later tonight and take it off and check that it is actually flat and flush. And then tomorrow, if I have time for it, I don't know if I'll have time for it, but the next step will be to cut out some teak strips to fill in the gap and bond those in, and we'll be done. Today's goal is to have this teak kind of measured out and laid out. It's basically just a junk pile that I found at the resale shop, so I'm going to use it to fill in these gaps. So the goal is to kind of lay it out and find out what's going to fit where. Some of these will probably have to get chiseled down into a kind of a wedge shape to make that angle right there. I'm probably going to use this long piece on the forward gap that's nice and wide. Yeah, I'll go ahead and get into marking it out. Okay, so to get these into their final shape, I've got my sharpened chisel here, and I'm going to be making a mess in my bedroom, which I'm alright with, and I'm just going to be shaving them down until they fit. This is a very tedious process, but it should give a very good result once finished, if I do it correctly. This is a lot like when I was shaving down the holly, except now we're working with teak. One fun fact about this teak, it is all recycled wood, so if you're worried about the environment, this is the wood for you. So I've got 5 pieces of teak cut and trimmed and fit along the edge. Next I'll need to epoxy it all in place after I clean it up. In this little corner here, the wood was starting to rot out, so what I think I'll do is I'll take some of the leftover sheet of teak and cut some pieces out to fill that in later. But right now I want to focus on getting all of these glued into place and secured. And once those are done, we'll come back and do the 2 side pieces. I've got all the pieces fitted as I want them to be, so now I'm going to pop them out one by one and carefully apply epoxy to both sides of it, and then I will put them back in their place before I... Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the painter's tape immediately so that it doesn't get bonded to the flooring, and try to clean up everything, that way there's no mess left behind. And with the 2 side panels glued into place, we are officially done. Let's have a quick recap. So let's review all the steps that we took to get to where I am now. We first bought some marine grade plywood and tried to form a subflooring for the teak and holly. That turned out to later be a mistake because the subflooring under the original teak and holly turned out to be in an excellent condition, and it would have been more of a pain in the butt to remove that than to just reuse it. The second step was to cut the grooves into the plywood for the holly, and then laminate the teak on top of that. I then cleaned up all the edges and started to mill out holly strips. Those holly strips were then glued into place, and I had to plane the whole thing to get them flush with the teak. So after the holly was flush with the teak, I then went ahead and cut the board into the final shapes that we ended up using. Once the weather cleared up a bit, I started to play with the stain and coloration of the teak, and then we sealed it all in with epoxy and varnish, and the last step was to glue it into place. This project has taken over a year because of laziness and weather and more laziness. A few of the important lessons I learned: making a teak and holly cabin sole from scratch is not an efficient or cost-effective way to do it. If you need to replace a part of your cabin sole, just buy the commercial grade stuff. Don't do what I just did. It takes a long time to do. Unless you have the proper tooling available for it, it's going to be a pain in the butt, and you're not going to get the perfect finish at the end that you would otherwise. So those are the lessons learned. So if you've been watching this since the first part I released over a year ago, thank you for sticking around. I hope you've enjoyed it. If not, I don't really care. This was for me, not for you guys. And also, I've noticed on the analytics that you guys actually prefer all the short, funny stuff I do anyway. So all these project videos I do, I'll keep doing them, but I'm not going to be relying on them heavily for viewership and whatnot. But if you've liked all the videos and you want to help me continue on with this project, don't forget to subscribe, because that helps me and it costs you absolutely nothing to subscribe. So, just click that button. That's all you have to do. Thank you. Bye.